I only helped a cat. But the alien woman said that was my test. HFY Ethan's boots echoed softly on the metal flooring of the bustling spaceport. The sounds of countless species chatting, bargaining, and haggling filled the air, blending with the hum of ships arriving and departing. The planet Varian was a melting pot of races and cultures, a central hub for traders and travelers. It was, however, just another stop for Ethan, who had been traveling for weeks, making his way through the galaxy with no particular destination. Ethan wasn't exactly a loner, but he'd grown used to being on his own. His life as a freelance technician didn't require much company. He fixed ships, delivered goods, and occasionally got involved in the odd job or two, nothing that ever kept him in one place for long. Today, as he walked through the crowded market, looking for a few supplies before moving on, he wasn't thinking about anything in particular. His mind wandered between the work ahead and the faint hope that the next few days would be uneventful. His gaze shifted from one colorful stall to another, but something caught his attention, a small creature, hiding in a dark corner of a nearby alleyway. At first, it looked like a regular cat, but as his eyes focused, Ethan saw it wasn't quite like any cat he had seen before. Its fur shimmered with an iridescent glow, a mix of deep blues and purples that almost looked like scales. Its eyes were wide and bright, glowing faintly in the dim light, and it looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Without thinking, Ethan stepped closer. The little creature seemed to cower at first, then let out a soft meow, a sound that somehow felt out of place in the noisy marketplace. He crouched down, offering a hand slowly, not wanting to startle it. "Hey there," he said gently. "Are you lost?" The creature didn't run, which made Ethan's heart ache. It looked thin, and its ribs were visible under the shimmering fur. He dug through his bag, finding the last piece of food he had, a small ration he had been saving for himself. He broke it in half and held it out to the cat, waiting. The creature hesitated for a moment before cautiously stepping forward. It sniffed the food, then, seemingly deciding it was safe, it began to nibble at the offering. Ethan smiled softly, watching it eat. It wasn't much, but it was the least he could do. He reached out and gently petted its head. The little cat didn't pull away, and for a brief moment he felt a connection, a sense of peace in the middle of the chaos around him. As he sat there, stroking the cat's fur, a presence at the edge of his awareness caught his attention. He looked up, startled, only to find a tall woman standing near him. She was unlike anyone Ethan had seen on this planet. Her skin had a subtle, otherworldly sheen, pale but glowing faintly, as though it was infused with starlight. Her eyes were an intense shade of violet, and her dark hair fell in soft waves down her back. She was dressed in flowing robes that seemed to shimmer, blending in with the crowd while simultaneously standing out. Ethan blinked, surprised by her sudden appearance. He hadn't noticed her approach, and for a moment he wondered if she had been there the entire time, watching him with quiet interest. "Is it yours?" the woman asked, her voice smooth and melodic, though it carried an undeniable strength. She was looking at the cat, which had finished the food and was now rubbing its face against Ethan's hand. Ethan looked at her, still somewhat taken aback. "No, I don't think so. I just found it here, looking like it could use some help." He offered a small shrug, standing up. It seemed to be hungry. The woman's gaze never left him, her expression unreadable. "It is not a simple creature," she said, her tone almost matter-of-fact. "You should be careful with it." Ethan raised an eyebrow, unsure whether she was joking or serious. "It's just a cat," he said, though his voice faltered slightly. "Not like it's a wild animal or anything." The woman studied him for a long moment, her eyes scanning him as though she was seeing more than just his outward appearance. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't pull away from the strange woman. Something about her presence was different. Not threatening exactly, but undeniably powerful. Her gaze was intense, as though she could read his thoughts, his very soul. "You don't know what it is," she said, a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "It is more than just a cat, it is a test." "A test?" Ethan repeated, still trying to process what she was saying. The woman nodded slowly. "You helped it. You gave it food without hesitation, without question. That action, the kindness in it, is what makes you unique. It's why you've been chosen." "Chosen?" Ethan repeated again, now feeling even more confused. "Chosen for what?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a step closer, her movements graceful and purposeful. "I am Lyra," she said, introducing herself with a quiet authority. And you, Ethan, are being tested, not by me but by forces greater than you can understand. Tested for what? Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He didn't know what this woman was talking about, but the way she spoke, so sure, so certain, made him uneasy. I don't even know who you are. Lyra smiled again, but this time it seemed almost like a secret she wasn't ready to share. I am not important. What matters is your response to the world around you. This cat, it's an ancient trial. You passed it simply by showing empathy. Ethan stood there trying to make sense of what she was saying. I don't understand. I just helped it because it was hungry. Exactly, Lyra said, her eyes gleaming with a strange light. In this galaxy, that is rare. People rarely act without expecting something in return, but you didn't. That is why you've been chosen. You have the potential for something greater, something far beyond what you can imagine. Your true test is yet to come. Ethan frowned, still not sure what to make of it. What are you talking about? What do you mean I've been chosen? And who are you to say any of this? Lyra's gaze softened for a moment, and then she turned away slightly, as if contemplating something in the distance. I can't explain everything now. But trust me, Ethan, this is only the beginning. The path ahead will require more than you realize, and you must decide if you are willing to take it. With that, she stepped back into the crowd, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the space where she had been. His hand still tingled from touching the cat's soft fur, and a sense of unease settled in his chest. He shook his head. This wasn't real, he told himself. It was just some strange encounter in a strange world. But even as he thought that, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn he hadn't expected. For the next few days, Ethan couldn't shake the strange encounter. Lyra's words echoed in his mind, haunting him even during the most mundane moments. A test. He couldn't understand why a simple act of kindness, feeding a hungry cat, would be considered anything significant. But there was something in the way she spoke, something in the way her eyes had looked at him, that made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to it than he'd first thought. The days passed quickly, and the hustle of the spaceport didn't let up. Ethan kept busy with his usual routine, gathering supplies, checking in on old contacts, and picking up small jobs here and there. The work was mundane, the kind of jobs that didn't require much thought, just steady hands and a clear mind. It was exactly the kind of work Ethan liked, simple and predictable. But no matter how hard he tried to focus, he kept thinking about that cat, about Lyra, and the strange warning she had given him. He had to admit that something had shifted within him, even if he couldn't put his finger on it. He found himself helping people more often than he normally would. A merchant struggling with a heavy load, Ethan stopped to lend a hand. A child whose toy had fallen into a crowded alley, Ethan reached down and picked it up, handing it back with a smile. Small things, maybe, but they added up. At night, when he lay on his cot in the tiny rented room he had secured at the spaceport, he couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to these little acts of kindness. Was this what Lyra had meant? Had his response to the cat, his instinct to help, been a sign of something deeper inside of him? It wasn't until the 5th day after their encounter that things started to take a more serious turn. Ethan was walking along the edge of the market, just outside the main building, when he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. There was a commotion up ahead, several people shouting, the sound of something breaking. Instinctively, Ethan moved forward, weaving through the crowd to get closer. As he neared the source of the noise, he saw a small group of people gathered around a man who had fallen to the ground. He was injured, clutching his side as if in pain. Without thinking, Ethan rushed forward, pushing through the onlookers. "Give him some space," he barked, kneeling beside the man. He quickly assessed the situation, broken ribs maybe, from the way the man was holding his chest. "What happened?" Ethan asked the crowd, but no one answered. They just stared at him, almost like they were waiting for him to do something. The man groaned, barely conscious. "Do you have medical supplies?" Ethan demanded, his voice firm but still calm. One of the onlookers nodded, hurrying off to fetch something. Ethan turned back to the man, applying pressure to the injured area as gently as he could. He glanced up again, looking for help, but the crowd was just standing there, watching. A chill ran down his spine. It was like they were expecting him to do something, expecting him to fix the situation. "Please," the man gasped, his eyes fluttering open. "Help me." Ethan nodded, giving him a reassuring smile even though his heart was racing. He had no medical training, but he had seen enough to know the basics. He tried his best to keep the man still, doing what he could until help arrived. The seconds felt like hours. Eventually, the person with medical supplies returned, and Ethan helped them stabilize the injured man before the local authorities arrived to take over. When everything was under control and the injured man was being led away by the authorities, Ethan turned to leave. He hadn't expected the crowd to be so quiet, but as he walked through them, they parted like water around a stone. It was only then that he realized that Lyra was standing just a few feet away, watching him with that same unreadable expression. "You did well," she said, her voice as calm as always. Ethan froze, surprised by her sudden appearance. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered. "That wasn't normal." Lyra tilted her head, studying him as if she were looking at something beyond the surface. "You think that was normal?" she asked, her voice low, almost amused. "Look around you. You were the only one who acted. The rest of them stood by, waiting for someone else to do something." Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of it. "I didn't do anything special. I just helped him." "No," Lyra said softly. "You acted without hesitation, without fear. That is rare. You're beginning to see it, aren't you? The test is more than what you do. It's how you respond when you're called upon." Ethan swallowed hard, feeling something stir inside of him. "I don't know what you mean." "The world will always test you," Lyra continued. "And it's not just the big moments, the battles, or the wars. It's the small choices, the ones you make without thinking. The way you respond when you have nothing to gain, when no one is watching. Those are the choices that define you." Ethan felt his mind racing. "Is this about the cat again?" Lyra smiled, though it wasn't a comforting smile. "It's more than just that cat. It's about everything that came after. You showed kindness to it, yes, but what matters is that you acted on it. You saw a need and you filled it. That's the test, Ethan, not the cat, but your heart." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. "I'm just trying to live my life. I don't want to be some kind of hero." "You already are," Lyra replied, her gaze unwavering. "You just don't realize it yet." She stepped closer, her presence somehow both intimidating and soothing at the same time. "The trials are just beginning. Your choices will have consequences, and not just for you. You're being tested, Ethan, but so is the entire galaxy. And it's people like you, with the strength to do what is right, who will shape the future." Ethan shook his head again, his mind spinning. "I don't know if I can do all that. I'm not some savior." "You don't have to be," Lyra said softly. "You just have to be yourself." She turned to leave, her robe swirling around her as she vanished into the crowd, leaving Ethan standing there in the growing silence. His thoughts were a blur, but one thing stood out. He couldn't ignore the feeling deep inside him, the nagging sense that Lyra was right. Something was changing. The world around him, the people, the challenges, everything was starting to feel different. And in some strange way, it felt like he was being drawn into something far larger than he had ever imagined. Ethan walked back to his small rented room later that night, his mind racing with questions. His life had always been simple: work, travel, and the occasional good deed. But now, every small decision felt significant. It was as if the very air around him had changed, and he was no longer just a passenger in his own life. The next morning, as he prepared to leave the spaceport for his next job, he couldn't help but wonder if the trials would come for him again. Would he be ready, or would he fail as so many others did? But one thing was certain: his life had already changed. And no matter how hard he tried to deny it, he was no longer the same person who had fed a stray cat just days ago. Ethan woke to the sound of his communicator buzzing on the small table next to his bed. He groggily reached over, wiping sleep from his eyes, and grabbed the device. It was a message from an old contact of his, someone he had worked with a few times on previous jobs. The message was short, but it caught his attention immediately. "Ethan, there's something you need to see. Meet me at the old cargo bay. I'll be waiting." He stared at the screen for a moment, his mind still groggy from sleep. The message felt urgent, though it didn't say much. Ethan knew this contact well enough to know that when they asked to meet in private, it was usually because something wasn't right. His gut told him that this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. He sighed and got out of bed. The spaceport wasn't far, but he didn't exactly enjoy walking around at this hour. He had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, something in the pit of his stomach told him that this wouldn't be just another routine job. By the time he reached the cargo bay, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft orange glow over the vast area. The cargo bay was quiet, its vastness filled with the lingering sounds of machinery and the occasional hiss of pressurized air. Ethan glanced around, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. He didn't see anyone at first, but then he heard footsteps approaching from behind one of the nearby shipping containers. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was his contact, a grizzled man named Caleb who often worked in the shadows, smuggling goods and running jobs that required a certain discretion. Caleb wasn't a bad guy, but his line of work made him a bit of a loner, someone you couldn't always trust. "Ethan," Caleb greeted him with a nod, his tone as gruff as always. "Glad you came. This isn't something I could send over the comms." Ethan gave him a short nod in return. "You've got my attention. What's going on?" Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There's a new player in town. They've been looking for someone. I don't know who they are, but they're not from around here. They've been asking about you, specifically about your actions over the last few days." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Why would they be asking about me?" Caleb's expression darkened. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. These people, they're not your usual crowd. They know things they shouldn't know. They seem to know about your little stunt with the injured man yesterday." Ethan felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had never told anyone about what had happened in the market. Sure, people had seen him help the injured man, but he didn't think it was something worth talking about. He had just done what felt right at the time. But Caleb's words made him realize that maybe things weren't as simple as they seemed. "Who are they?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter than usual. "What do they want with me?" "I don't know," Caleb admitted, "but they're serious, Ethan. I've heard rumors about them, about what they can do. They've got resources and they're not afraid to use them. I don't think you want to get mixed up with them." Ethan clenched his jaw. He wasn't someone who shied away from danger, but this felt different. There was something about these people that made his gut twist. He had a feeling they weren't looking for him because of some random act of kindness. "Where are they now?" Ethan asked, his mind already racing. Caleb looked around nervously before leaning in closer. "They're close, but I've arranged for you to leave. I know a way out of the spaceport, a way that'll get you clear of them. They'll be looking for you, but I can get you out of sight." Ethan thought about it for a moment. He had a lot of questions, but none of them mattered if these people were truly as dangerous as Caleb seemed to think. He needed answers, and to get them, he would have to trust Caleb. "All right," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I'll take your help. But I need to know everything you know about these people. I need to understand what's going on." Caleb nodded, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of unease in the older man's eyes. "I'll tell you what I can, but you need to understand something, Ethan. These people, they're not just looking for you, they're looking for something more, and you're right at the center of it." Ethan didn't know exactly what that meant, but the more Caleb spoke, the more uneasy he felt. He wasn't just some random person these mysterious figures had been watching. Something more was at play, something that connected him to them in ways he didn't understand. Without another word, Caleb led Ethan through the maze of cargo containers and dark corners of the port. They moved quickly, Caleb taking him to a narrow service door that led out to the lower levels of the port. The place was deserted, but it still felt as though something was watching them, something unseen yet palpable. As they reached the exit, Caleb paused, checking around them one last time. "They'll be looking for you here," he said, his voice low. "I don't know how long we've got before they figure out where you are, but once we're out of the port, you'll be on your own." Ethan felt a strange mix of anxiety and determination. He wasn't sure what was waiting for him, but he couldn't back down now. The stakes were higher than he'd realized, and he knew he couldn't run forever. "I'll manage," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I've done it before." Caleb studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're going to need more than just a few tricks to get through this. Be careful, Ethan. These people don't play games." As Ethan stepped out into the early morning light, he took a deep breath. The city was still quiet, the sun barely breaking through the horizon, but he knew his life was no longer the same. The quiet, simple days he'd known were gone. Whatever this new threat was, whatever Caleb had been warning him about, it was coming for him. And he couldn't hide from it. "Stay in touch," Caleb said, his voice a little more serious now. "And remember, trust no one who's looking for you, not yet." Ethan nodded, then turned to leave. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew that he couldn't stay. His mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was clear. He was being dragged into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The test wasn't over, and the trials were only just beginning. As he walked through the dim streets, the quiet hum of the city in the background, Ethan's thoughts kept returning to Lyra. Her cryptic words about the test, about the choices that would define him, echoed in his mind. Was this part of the test? Was this the moment that would decide what kind of man he would be? The unknown stretched out before him, a vast and daunting expanse. But there was no turning back now. Ethan didn't look back as he walked away from the cargo bay. The spaceport loomed behind him, a massive, bustling hub of activity, but it felt more like a prison now. The air felt thicker with each step, the weight of Caleb's words pressing on him. These people don't play games. That message kept repeating itself in Ethan's mind, over and over. Whoever they were, whatever they wanted, they had him in their sights. He wasn't just a random traveler anymore. He wasn't even sure what he was anymore. He didn't know where to go next, but he had no choice but to keep moving. The last few days had turned his life upside down. He had fed a stray cat, something as simple as offering food to an animal, and somehow that had set everything into motion. He had been watched, tested, and now he was running from people who knew more about him than he did about them. Ethan found himself walking through the streets of Varian City, his footsteps echoing in the early morning quiet. The marketplace was still waking up, vendors setting up their stalls, but the city was oddly empty compared to usual. The streets were too quiet for his liking. It was as if everyone was hiding, like they knew something was about to happen. He found a small diner tucked in between two larger buildings. It wasn't fancy, just a hole-in-the-wall place where the food was decent and the service was quick. He slid into a corner booth, trying to stay inconspicuous. He needed to think, to plan. He couldn't do this alone. The waitress came over, an older woman with a tired smile. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Just a coffee," Ethan replied. "Black and whatever you've got for breakfast." She nodded and left without asking questions. Ethan let his mind wander while he waited, his eyes scanning the diner, taking in the few people scattered around. He tried to calm his racing thoughts, but it wasn't easy. Every part of him wanted to do something, anything, to solve this, to make the pieces fit. He knew he couldn't stay in the city much longer. Caleb had warned him, whoever was after him would be looking for him, and he couldn't afford to be found. But what was the next step? How could he fight something he didn't even understand? The waitress returned with his food and coffee, placing them in front of him. Ethan barely noticed the food. He was still deep in thought, his mind whirling with possibilities. But then, as he took the first sip of his coffee, something in the air changed. A sudden, unmistakable sense of being watched prickled his skin. Ethan froze, the mug halfway to his lips. He looked around the diner, his heart pounding. The air felt colder. The sounds of the diner, the clinking of cutlery and quiet chatter seemed to fade into the background. He focused in on the other patrons. A man sitting at the counter caught his attention. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and dark glasses, even though it was still early morning. He hadn't been there when Ethan arrived. The man was staring straight at him, his eyes hidden behind the lenses of his sunglasses, but the intensity of his gaze was unmistakable. Ethan didn't recognize him, but he could feel the weight of his stare, as if the man was studying him. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to leave. He didn't wait for the man to make the first move. He paid for his meal in a rush, leaving a tip without even looking at the waitress. He stood up, trying to remain calm, but the sweat on his palms betrayed him. He walked out of the diner without looking back. As he stepped onto the street, the noise of the city hit him again, but this time it felt distant, muffled, like he was moving through a dream. His thoughts raced, the man in the diner. Was he one of them, a scout? A member of the group Caleb had warned him about? Ethan didn't know, but he couldn't afford to find out. His feet carried him down narrow alleyways, through busy streets, away from the center of the city. He knew he couldn't go back to the spaceport. He couldn't stay where he was. His only option was to keep moving, keep running. He spent hours walking, losing track of time as he made his way through unfamiliar parts of the city. The streets began to shift from urban sprawl to more industrial areas. The buildings grew taller, the air heavier with the scent of oil and machinery. Eventually, he found himself at the edge of the city, staring out at the desolate stretch of land that lay beyond. The spaceport wasn't far now. Ethan considered going back, but he quickly dismissed the thought. The last thing he wanted was to walk right back into the hands of whoever was hunting him. Instead, he turned away from the city's center, walking toward a less traveled path. The landscape was barren, The ground cracked and dry, as though it had been abandoned for years. Ethan didn't know what he was looking for, but he felt a strange pull toward this desolate place. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the wasteland before him, he saw something in the distance. A faint silhouette, barely visible against the horizon, but there was something about it that caught his attention. Ethan squinted, his heart pounding in his chest. The shape was getting closer. It wasn't human, that much was clear. The figure moved with an unnatural grace. The way it glided across the barren landscape made it seem almost otherworldly. As it drew closer, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The figure wasn't alone. There were more of them, dozens, appearing out of the dust and shadows like they had materialized from thin air. Ethan stepped back instinctively, his pulse racing. He didn't know who these beings were, but everything about them screamed danger. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and their movements were fluid, as though they didn't need to follow the rules of gravity. He didn't have much time. He had to make a decision, run or fight. There was no time to hide. And so he did the only thing that made sense. He turned and ran. He sprinted through the desolate landscape, his legs aching as he pushed his body harder than it had ever gone before. His breath came in ragged gasps as he dashed through the dry dirt, his only thought to put as much distance between himself and the mysterious figures as possible. He could hear them behind him now, their footsteps unnervingly light, as if they were closing in on him without effort. Their speed was impossible, but Ethan didn't dare slow down. If they caught him now, he didn't know what would happen. He had no plan, no way of fighting them. The land stretched on, endless and empty, but still they followed. He could hear their whispers, their voices too soft for him to make out, but they sounded like something out of a nightmare, low, melodic, and filled with a strange power. His mind raced, trying to figure out what he could do. He knew he couldn't keep running forever. And then, just as he thought he couldn't go any further, he spotted something up ahead. A small structure, half buried in the ground, barely visible in the fading light. It looked like an old outpost, maybe abandoned, but it was his only hope. Ethan pushed forward, his legs screaming in pain, his body on the verge of collapse. He reached the structure and dove inside just as the first of the shadowy figures reached the spot where he had been. He collapsed onto the cold, hard floor of the outpost, gasping for breath, his heart pounding. The figures didn't follow him inside, at least not yet. But he knew they would be waiting outside, watching him. Ethan pulled himself to his feet, looking around for anything he could use. He needed to think, but the pressure was mounting. He didn't know what was happening or who these beings were, but one thing was clear. His life had changed forever. There was no going back now. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps as he crouched in the shadows of the old outpost, his mind racing. The figures outside had stopped moving. He could feel their presence, like a heavy weight pressing against him, their gaze locked on the place where he had hidden. There was no sound, just the suffocating silence of the wasteland surrounding him. They were waiting, and he had no idea what they wanted or how long they would stay. His heart was pounding in his chest, every thud echoing in his ears. His body was exhausted, aching from the relentless sprint, but his mind refused to slow down. He couldn't stay here forever. Whatever they were not ordinary creatures, and they weren't going to leave until they had what they were after. Ethan glanced around the small outpost, trying to make sense of his surroundings. It was an old structure, built into the side of a rocky ridge. There were rusted metal walls, half-collapsed windows, and a few faded signs he couldn't read. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, but the emptiness inside didn't comfort him. It only felt like another trap. There was no way out except through the front, where the figures were still lurking. He needed to think of something fast, anything to get out of this mess. He couldn't just run again. They were too fast, too precise. He had no way of outrunning them and no weapons to fight back. He had no choice but to rely on his wits. His eyes flicked back to the entrance and then to the narrow corridor at the back of the outpost. He couldn't see what was beyond it, but there was a faint light flickering from deep within. It could be another way out, or it could be a dead end. He had to risk it. Taking one last look at the entrance where the figures still waited, Ethan rose to his feet, his legs feeling like lead. He moved as quietly as he could through the dimly lit hallway, his eyes straining to see in the half-light. The air inside was thick with dust, and the walls creaked with every step he took. He could hear the faintest whisper of the figures outside, but their presence felt distant now, as if they were slowly pulling away. He didn't know how long he had, but he wasn't going to wait around to find out. The corridor wound deeper into the outpost, and after what felt like an eternity, it opened up into a large, open chamber. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols he didn't recognize, glowing faintly in the dark. At the center of the room was a massive, circular device covered in layers of dust and rust. It looked like an ancient piece of technology, but nothing about it made sense to Ethan. He stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. The symbols on the walls were unlike anything he had ever seen, and the device itself hummed with an energy he couldn't place. It felt wrong, as though it were alive, waiting for something. He didn't have time to figure it out. Whatever this place was, it was a relic of a time long past. Ethan's eyes scanned the room, looking for any clue as to what he was supposed to do next. And then, just as he was about to turn back, he saw something that made his heart stop, a single figure standing motionless in the far corner of the chamber. It was Lyra. She was dressed in her flowing robes, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. She didn't move, didn't speak. She simply watched him, her gaze as intense as ever. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected to see her again, especially not here in this place. He had thought she was just another part of the strange test he had been caught in, but now, standing in front of him, she felt different. She was no longer the mysterious figure who had appeared to him in the spaceport. She was something else entirely. "What is this place?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. Lyra's gaze softened for just a moment, and then she took a step forward. "It is where everything began," she said, her voice low and calm. "This is the heart of the trial, the place where your choices will define the future." Ethan stared at her, confused. "I don't understand. I'm not part of some grand plan. I'm just a guy trying to get by. Why are you telling me this? Why me?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward the device in the center of the room, her steps measured, deliberate. She didn't look back as she spoke. "You don't see it yet, do you? You've been tested without knowing it. Every choice you made, every small action was part of something larger than yourself. It was never about the cat or the man in the marketplace. It was about who you are, Ethan, what you're capable of." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I didn't do anything special. I just helped people." "And that is exactly why you're here," Lyra said, turning to face him. "You didn't hesitate, you acted, and that, Ethan, is why the Council is interested in you. You are the one who will lead, the one who will guide humanity." Ethan's mind spun. He couldn't comprehend what she was saying. The weight of her words pressed on him, but he refused to believe them. "I'm not a leader, I'm just a guy. I've done nothing special." Lyra took a step closer, her eyes glowing brighter now, the intensity of her presence filling the room. "You are far more than you realize. You've been chosen because of what you are, not because of what you think you've done." Ethan looked at her, his mind racing. "I still don't understand. What does this device have to do with me? What is this trial you keep talking about?" Lyra smiled, her expression unreadable. "This device is part of the Council's plan. It's what will allow you to understand, to awaken the power inside you. The power you've been carrying all along." Ethan shook his head, trying to grasp the meaning behind her words. "I don't have any power. I'm not like them, those people who were chasing me. I'm just normal." "No, Ethan," Lyra said, her voice soft yet filled with an undeniable force. "You are not like them. You are human, and that is what makes you powerful." She stepped forward again, her hand reaching out to touch the surface of the device. The symbols on the walls flared to life, glowing brighter and brighter until the entire room was bathed in a strange, shimmering light. Ethan took a step back, the intensity of the light blinding. But as he shielded his eyes, he felt a strange warmth spread through him. It wasn't the heat of the light, it was something deeper, something inside of him that had been awakened. The device in the center of the room hummed, its surface vibrating with energy. Ethan felt his heart race, his body thrumming with a power he couldn't explain. "You're ready," Lyra said, her voice distant as if she were speaking from far away. "The choice is yours now. The trial has ended. What will you do with the power inside you? Will you lead or will you fall?" Ethan didn't know what to say. The weight of her words was too much to bear. He was being asked to choose to lead. But lead what? Lead who? He wasn't a hero, he wasn't special. He had just been trying to survive, to get through life without drawing attention to himself. And now, here he was, standing in front of a device that could change everything, with a woman who seemed to know more about him than he did about himself. The light from the device intensified, the room shaking as the power within it surged. Ethan's heart raced in his chest, but a strange sense of calm washed over him. Maybe he didn't have all the answers. Maybe he wasn't ready, but one thing was clear: this was his choice, and he would have to make it. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt like he had the power to shape it.